time for the heavy duty and highway class trucks. So as you see, we don't have as many to do. There are not as many to do. And sadly, most of them are either terrible or barely okay. That is at least compared to, you know, the heavy and the off-road trucks. I kind of get the feeling that Saber wanted to include as many trucks as possible, which is great, you know, in this game. It really is great. I mean, having the broadest variety of trucks available is fantastic, but it does mean that balancing all of those trucks against each other is a bit of a problem. And this is kind of how... This is kind of where the highway and heavy duty class falls down. There are some trucks, there are definitely some trucks in these two categories that are decent, you know? Truck dating sim. 2023. What are the gifts you're going to give the trucks? Oil and new water filters and stuff. You know, I honestly wouldn't put it past Japan to have something like that already, you know? Some of the crazy dating sims that come out of that country, I wouldn't be surprised if they had a truck dating sim. That's totally within the realms of possibility. But yes, some of these trucks are not bad. Some of them are pretty decent, and in like early stages of the game, Michigan, Alaska, and even in Tamir, I think some of them stand up. You know, some of them are perfectly usable if you don't have anything else that is, you know, viable. If you haven't unlocked a different truck, if you're not at a high enough level, if you haven't found a better vehicle, which is odd because by the time you get to Tamir, you can unlock the Taiga, and then everything else is pointless. Almost. It is a greedy truck, that one. But we'll go through these. We'll do a brief little rundown of each one as I go through. I have been testing these, because quite frankly, these are probably the trucks that I have least used in the game, to be honest. There's a couple of them that I have used more than others, but a lot of them are just unusable. So, yeah, or at least unusable unless you want to give yourself a massive challenge to the game. So, right, where are we? Ooh, but that's not a bad idea. Highway region. Actually, that would make some of these trucks useful. You know, if they had some regions where they were like connected by massive highway stretches. To be fair, Ontario is kind of like that, because there is the road that goes pretty much from one end of one map to the other end of the other map, and is pretty flat, pretty straightforward, and apart from a few little pitfalls here and there, is very capable for highway trucks. So, you know, there is that option, but yeah, a lot of the time, not really. Anyway, let's start off. The Cat, that's the CT680, I believe, this one. This guy, was this one of the free DLC ones, or was that the other Cat? No, that was the other Cat. This is one of the base game trucks, isn't it? Yeah, I think this is one of the base game trucks, and it's sadly not great. Not great. A major problem with most of these trucks is that they don't get access to mud tyres. Being American trucks, they only get the off-road tyres at best. Oh, my cursor isn't on the stream. There we go. There, now it's on the stream. Brilliant. So the major problem with all of these trucks is that they can't get mud tyres. And that does limit their usability in some areas of the game. Quite a lot of areas of the game, to be absolutely fair. Let's be real. It's called SnowRunner, but it really is Mud Runner 2. Yeah, Walker, I definitely would say that. I've been testing this guy, and it does get a lot of wheel spin. The engine is pretty pathetic as well. It's not a very good engine. It also lacks utility. It can't take a crane, a flatbed, and a trailer. You lose the hitch if you put a flatbed on this thing, which means you're dealing with semi-trailers if you want a crane, or forgoing the flatbed altogether and towing a hitch trailer. So, all in all, not very good. I wouldn't buy it, you know? I mean, if you could find this truck free in the wild, it would probably be a lot more usable, but having to actually buy this thing is not that great. Yeah. Its brother, however, this is the... Where are we? Yeah, the CK681 is a little bit better. I'm still going to put it in a C tier. It can have it can have the ultimate combo of crane, flatbed, and trailer. You do get the hitch. It's got a much longer wheelbase. Whoa! Indeed. It does have a hitch that you can use because it has a longer wheelbase, but it does have a redundant axle on it, which does tend to get stuck quite a bit, I found. A little bit more powerful, little less wheel spin. I actually remember using this truck on my PlayStation playthrough. No, I'm okay, babe. Thanks very much. Could be a B tier because it's got a strong engine. Possibly, Walker. Possibly. The engine is pretty impressive. It does have a very good amount of pulling power. And stability. You are right. You know, you are it's definitely better than the Cat, and I did use it for a long time on my PlayStation playthrough. You know, yeah. Let's push it up to a B tier. It is a very decent truck, and because it's free, with the DLC, if you are playing anything other than hard mode, you get it free in the garage, which means that it has a lot more usability because you're not having to pay for it. Yeah, so I do remember using this. Wisconsin, I believe, I was using this truck quite a lot. Democratic tier list. Actually, but I was considering, I was umming and ahhing whether this was a B or a C tier. But you guys are kind of convincing me it's more a B tier than it is more than a C tier. It's definitely a lot better than the other Cat. It's free, it's good power, it has good utility. It can take most of the add-ons in the game, I think. I don't believe there's many that it misses out on. So yeah, B tier. Let's put it in the B tier. Why not? Why not? It's not Christmas, but why not? Now, let's move on. The Kodiak. Ah, the Kodiak. Oh, the C70. I don't like this truck at all. I detest this truck. I've just never had any good experiences with it at all. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. It suffers horrendously from wheel spin. It has zero power to it. It doesn't seem to be able to pull anything. And only being a 4x4, it loses a lot of traction on that rear axle. And you need all-wheel drive with it in order to get any kind of performance out of it. And that, of course, affects your fuel consumption. So, yeah, it's going in the D tier. Yeah, Walker, that's another good point as well. It is very, very bouncy, shall we say. If you put a raised suspension on this thing, I think it can get a raised suspension if I remember rightly. If you put a raised suspension on this thing, don't think you're going to be on your wheels very much. It's not as tippy as the Fleet Star, but it's certainly not very stable either. Speaking of the Fleet Star, that's next in the list, and it's going to go into a C tier. There are problems. There are considerable problems with the Fleet Star, shall we say. It is incredibly bouncy. It is very tippy. It doesn't get mud tyres. But what it does get is pretty much everything else. It gets all-wheel drive. It gets diff lock. It gets a raised suspension. It can take a crane, a sideboard, and a trailer. It has access to pretty much all of the add-ons in the game. There's kind of a reason why they give it to you outside the garage, outside the first garage in Michigan, for free. And that's because it's a decent truck to start with. It gets replaced very quickly. You know, Michigan, Alaska, that's kind of as far as you want to take it. Ooh, Dan, interesting. You don't put the crane on the Fleet Star. Do you find that helps with its stability a little bit, not having the weight of the crane on it? I imagine it probably would. I just love having cranes on my vehicles. Yes. Okay. Yes. I imagine. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose so. If you get away with not needing the crane, that probably helps its stability quite a bit. Like I was saying though, I like having cranes on my vehicles. If I can do crane and something, then I'm happy. Because you never know when an unexpected trailer tip is going to ruin your day. And if you don't have a crane, it's always a pain. But yeah. Pushes the center of the load behind the wheels, hence the flip star. That is true, actually, Dan. Yeah, yeah. With the crane on it, the sideboard bed shifts rearwards more over the back axle, which means it's more prone to tipping. Yeah, that's actually a very good point. You know, that might be a better way to use the Fleet Star then, not having a crane on it. But yeah, it's a solid enough truck, but it comes with its issues. So let's see, what next have we got here? Now, I'm actually going to do these two vehicles together. So this is the Ford. Or is that the TranStar? No, that's the TranStar. This is the Ford and the TranStar are both going into the D category. They're pretty much identical, these two vehicles. The Ford... Am I getting those the right way around? I can never remember which way around these two. I believe this is the Ford and this is the TranStar. So the Ford, I would probably say, is the better of the two. If memory serves me right, it has a slightly larger fuel tank, which is always nice. And unlike the TranStar, it can actually take a crane, a sideboard bed, and a trailer, which the TranStar can't because it has a much shorter wheelbase. So in terms of utility, it wins out. But in terms of everything else, oh boy, if you want to play SnowRunner on hard mode, if you want to play it on near impossible mode, then use these two vehicles. No diff lock, no all-wheel drive. The Ford, I do believe, gets a raised suspension, but I don't think the TranStar does. But even if it did, it probably wouldn't help it that much. Yeah, in a game where you come across mud like, you know, air, not having all-wheel drive and not having diff lock are really bad, especially when you also don't have mud tires as well. It just compounds, you know. It really does make the use of these trucks very niche, like so niche. I remember on my playthrough I got the TranStar. I actually tried using it as a fuel truck because I thought, oh hey, you know, put a fuel tanker on it, drive it around a little bit, refuel some of my trucks, but it just didn't work. It just didn't work. It was very unstable with the fuel tank on it, and it literally couldn't go anywhere. If it wasn't a paved road, it couldn't go anywhere. Really, really bad. So would not recommend unless you are really, you know, sadistic. So yeah, not the greatest choice. Probably the worst trucks in the game in terms of usability. But you know, they have. What I will say about these two is that they have good power. Their engines are superb. You know, so you know if you do find a use for them, they'll have good power in order to do it. But that's about the only thing going for them, sadly. Let's see now, what's next? The Brigadier. Now, here's a truck that I like. That's a nice, strong B tier. That is. That's a nice, strong B tier. It's kind of like the Fleet Star, but better. It's kind of like the GMC, but better. You know, it's still a heavy duty truck, but it has all of the options. It has all-wheel drive. It has diff lock. Doesn't have the mud tires again, but it can do a crane, a sideboard bed, and a trailer. And it's a solid vehicle. You know, I've never used it until I started testing it for these tier lists, and I can safely say that if I had access to the Brigadier earlier on in my playthroughs, I would have used it a lot because it just performed nicely. It's not going to go through situations as well as, you know, more designed trucks. It's not going to tackle mud as well as some of the off-road class. It's not going to be able to pull as big loads as the heavy class, but it's a solid little workhorse, you know. Walker, I didn't find it as tippy as the Fleet Star. I know what you mean. It did have a little bit of a wobble to it, but I didn't find it as bad as the Fleet Star or the Kodiak. So, you know, for the reasons of versatility, it's going up in the B tier. I will say just be a little bit careful because it will roll if you put it in a situation that's a bit extreme for it. But generally, it's not that bad. Not that bad at all. So B tier for this guy. Now, speaking of the GMC, there we go. That's also going up in the B tier, which was a surprise to me, let me tell you. Very much a surprise that I decided to put this as far up the list as I did. When SnowRunner first came out, the GMC was pretty bad. It didn't have the options that it had now. It's had a lot of new options added to it. I'm trying to think back to what it was like in the very beginning, but I can't remember. It's still a highway truck, which is a surprise because it looks more like a heavy-duty truck. But for a highway truck, it has performance, unlike these two here, which keep away, you know. But it has some good performance behind it. It can get an all-wheel drive. It can get a diff lock. It can get a race suspension. It can, I believe, it can also take the crane sideboard trailer combo. Ooh, there we are. You're saying the fuel's a bit bad. Well, I think that is a problem that most of these trucks suffer from, is fuel usage. Some of them not so much, but some of them do have high burns. But the GMC is not bad. If you don't... if you don't put it in too stressful a situation, the fuel burn isn't going to be that bad. And I think overall it really does perform admirably for a highway truck. Um, so yeah, it's going up in the B tier. It's a good thing. It's like I wish it had the versatility that it has now when it first came out in the game, because I would have been I would have had a much different opinion of it for a much longer period of time. It's only recently that I've really come around to the GMC and realised that, yeah, actually in the right situations it can be a very good truck. But yeah, yeah, it's getting its dues now, I suppose. I've been a long time hater of the GMC, and recent changes have definitely changed my opinion on it. So moving on, this one is the HX520, the International. I would say probably the best truck on this tier list. It's a really solid little workhorse. I bought this guy for instead of buying the International Paystar, the 5070 off-road truck, and I never regretted it. You can get kicked from multiplayer games for using the GMC. Oh dear. Deary, deary me. Oh no, you're saying can get kicked but joining with S tier trucks. Ah, right, yes. I suppose that is true. Like, you join people's games with trucks that are too good, and they're like, "No, you're making the game too easy. Get out of here." So yeah, joining in the GMC, everyone's like, "Okay, sure, I guess." But yeah, the HX, the International, is a really solid workhorse. Again, like some of the other trucks in this tier, it can have all-wheel drive, diff lock, no, it doesn't get a raised suspension. It doesn't get a raised suspension, the HX, I don't think. But it can take the trailer, crane, sideboard combo, which is a plus point for it. And I don't actually think it needs the raised suspension. The HX has a pretty good ground clearance as it is, and so long as you don't make the blunder of just yeeting it into a mud pit, then it's fine. Yeah, it doesn't have a raised suspension. Thank you, Walker. But yeah, like most of the trucks on this list, if you yeet one of these trucks into a mud pit, you're going to regret it. But I think the HX has the best chance of getting itself out of one of those situations. Yeah, it has a really nice engine to it, which is a bonus. And just a good versatile trick. Again, I believe this was a free DLC. Was it this one and the cat? I believe were in. I believe this was a DLC truck, wasn't it? And I believe it was free again. Just like the cat 681. So yeah, again, if you're not playing on a hard difficulty mode, then you get this truck for free, and it's totally worth using. You digging yourself a hole there, Artwin? Yeah, she's digging in a corner. She's finally come out from her log, only to dig herself a hole somewhere else. Ah, dearie me. Right, let's move on, shall we? Let's move on. So the Wolfpack truck, the 57X highway truck, going in the C tier. Surprised me. That's what I will. That's what I will say about the 57X. It surprised me. I was expecting another kind of Ford TranStar situation with this thing. I looked at it and went, yeah, that's the kind of truck you see on American highways, cruising down the outside lane. That's where it belongs. But it has some options with it, which do actually make it quite interesting. It gets a raised suspension and it gets all-wheel drive. So it misses out on the diff lock, which means that I certainly wouldn't put it into some mud pits or over too much kind of undulating terrain where the grip of the tyres changes. But it's not bad. It actually has quite a considerable amount of power behind it that I found. And, ooh, excuse me. And that allowed it, coupled with the all-wheel drive, to kind of push itself through most muddy situations, which is kind of interesting, you know? The one thing I will say about this truck is that it lacks a bit of utility. It can't take very many add-ons, as you might expect from the look of it. It can have a saddle, but if you take a crane, it can't have a saddle. So you're limited to bumper pull trailers if you take a crane with it, which means that you really want to just take a saddle on it, slap a semi-trailer on it, and just go, you know? Still probably wouldn't recommend it, you know? It's not that great. Not that great. I wouldn't recommend spending money on it, you know? Which is a shame, because as a DLC truck, and not a free DLC truck, you do have to spend money on it to get it. There's no other way. But I mean, if you wanted to have a bit of a laugh, then it's all right. It's all right, but it's certainly not great. But it's better than I expected. You know, I think that's its tagline: better than expected. Exceeds expectations. It's like, depends on what those expectations were in the first place. But yeah, could have been a lot worse than it actually was. So yeah, place it there for now. And finally, the good old white Western Star. That's going up in the B tier as well. That's probably, I would say, once you get to Smithville Dam on Michigan, once you rescue this thing, once you, thank you, Walker. Once you get this thing and you recover it to the garage, you get it repaired up, and you get it out on the road, it kind of becomes your staple vehicle for a long time. Nostalgia making it an A tier. Yeah, it's a really good vehicle. It's got some good access to upgrades. It does get a raised, it does get all-wheel drive, it does get diff lock, it doesn't get mud tyres, but then none of these trucks do. It can't take a crane and a sideboard bed and a trailer. That's kind of the downside of it compared to some of these other B tier trucks. But what the Western Star does have is power, and lots of it. It can push its way through most situations, even without mud tyres. It'll just keep going, and unless you face plant yourself, then you're not going to have much of a worry. This is assuming you're using it on the first few maps. I mean, what I will say about this particular tier list is these ratings are based on not only kind of a comparison to the other vehicles that are available in the game, but also the maps that you're using it on. The base game maps and certain other maps. I can't do. Yeah, you're right, Dan. It is odd that it can't have the triple combo, because, like you say, it does have quite a long wheelbase. Yeah. Interesting, Bart. Interesting. Not a bad idea, actually. Yeah, take the engine from the GMC, put it in the Western Star, because a lot of these trucks share most of their upgrades. So yeah, that is very possible. Um, but yes, for most of these trucks, you want to be using them on the base game areas. Michigan, Alaska, Tamir is debatable. I probably wouldn't take many of these trucks to Tamir. Maybe some of the B tier trucks I would take to Tamir, but certainly none of the other ones. Kola Peninsula, no. No, 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 no. Probably not Yukon either. There, maybe Big Salmon Peak. Big Salmon Peak might be a decent map for some of these trucks, especially the B tier ones. But flooded lands, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. There's too much mud for these guys. But some of the other maps, Wisconsin's a good map. Wisconsin is definitely a good map for these guys. And what other maps have we got that these guys could be useful on? I think actually the Glades could be quite good for these trucks. There's a lot of roads, a lot of kind of less extreme terrain, shall we say. So the Glades could be a good shout for some of these trucks. Maine, Walker, Maine's not a bad choice either. Yeah, I could see Maine working. The first map definitely. The second map, some of the areas might be pushing it, but you could push through. You could probably push through with some good winch action, I would say. But yeah, I think most of the other maps, certainly stuff like Amur, Kola, places like that, you don't want to use these trucks. They're just not gonna be very good at all. Which is a shame because some of them, I actually really like the look of some of these trucks. The heavy duty class trucks, especially, I love the look of. I love the long nose and the general feel of them. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. I do like that. Because a lot of the trucks that we have here in the UK basically look like these guys. More like this guy here, I would say. The Transstar is probably the commonest looking truck that you're going to get here in the UK. All flat faced, and that's about it. So trucks like this, trucks like these B tier ones, really do kind of look cool to me. I love the look of them, and I just wish they were a bit better. You know, I mean, I know there are trucks that look like this. There's like the Vorons and such like that have a similar kind of look, but I like these ones as well. It's regulation based. That's interesting, Bart, actually. So so the regulations kind of govern what the trucks can look like. I suppose that's right, isn't it? Because these guys will have much more space for the engine and such like. So if there's no regulations on the truck itself, then they can do whatever they want with it. Yeah. Interesting. All comes down to bureaucracy at the end of the day, doesn't it? Always bureaucracy. Damn those administrators in middle management. Spoiling our fun. Anyway, so that's it for this particular tier list, guys. Very short one. Not very many in this category. We have the off-road trucks left to do. We'll do those next week. That should be an interesting one. That's a big tier list, guys. So yeah, do join me for that. As for right now, though, I am going to go and have some dinner. Yeah, see what I can find for dinner. And then I'm going to get ready for work tomorrow. Ooh. So, next stream, guys, will be on Thursday. Haven't quite decided what I'm going to be doing yet, so watch the Discord for more information on that. and I do hope you'll join me. And thanks for joining me today. Always appreciate your company. Always great to have you guys around. So yeah, thank you. And as always, guys, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.